In today's episode of the Pathmark Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Laura Bernhard, and she's sailing over from the team over at Assurance IT. She's actually the marketing director, helping their clients, mid-sized businesses, to become cyber resilient. And we want to really figure out what that actually means, what Assurance IT is all about, and how Laura is thinking about growth for the company in terms of the channels she's excited about as the director of marketing. So, Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting. I'm so excited to chat.
Very good. So maybe just for everybody who hasn't heard about Assurance IT, in a 360 overview, what is it all about?
Okay, so Assurance IT basically is resellers for cybersecurity solutions. I'm not sure if all your listeners are aware, but cybersecurity is on the rise, and there is actually a cyber attack every 39 seconds. Whether or not we hear about it, most companies like to keep it private, right? It doesn't really look good as a company if people know that you've been, ransomware attacked. And as a firm, we are really there to help you along the way to be preventative, but also if something happens to your firm.
That is very clear, very straightforward, at least sort of in the mission, obviously how to do all of this and achieve that's a whole other different level. What I'm curious about is, what types of companies do you typically help to protect? Because obviously a different range of businesses at different size, different industries can be affected to a different degree. What is a company that typically benefits most from Assurance IT?
Absolutely. So that's a great question because just last year, Assurance IT kind of changed in terms of their offering. Before we just offered one solution, whereas now we offer 15. And obviously, when you offer 15 different cybersecurity solutions, you're like, oh my God, we can help everyone. But as marketers, we both know that that's awful. That's the worst thing that you can do. So what we did is we actually got together as a team and started to niche down. We now really focus in on data protection and data privacy, and we help the provinces of Quebec and Ontario in Canada. The size of the firm is around like 200 people and more. And internally, we're focused on construction, transportation, manufacturing, but we help architecture firms, we help healthcare, and a few other industries as well.
Mm-hmm. That gives us a good overview. And what would you say typically within those organizations who is reaching out? Like who is, the one that is bringing it? Is that coming more from a sort of a business angle because they're concerned, or from an IT angle because they've already identified kind of where the issue lies?
Yeah, that's also a great question because with cybersecurity, there always has to be a trigger. People are not like, I really want to secure my business. It's like my top priority. Nobody wakes up and thinks about that, if we're being honest here. It's usually because something bad happens or they heard of something bad happen. So one of our clients this year actually came to us because their neighbor, literally like the physical building next to them, burnt down, and the company didn't have any backups or anything to protect their data. And as a result, they lost everything. So that company freaked out, found us on YouTube and reached out, and now they're our client. So usually the trigger comes from upper management, like the CEO, CIO, CTO, something like that. Or there's a huge catastrophic event that they heard about and then they reach out.
I see. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm curious then, is that then still like, would that be then a business owner, for example, that, sees something like that? Is that an IT manager? Who do you see being concerned first, let's say?
So it's always, when these kind of things happen, it's always comes from upper management, but it's always the IT person that reaches out and looks for a solution.
Gotcha. That makes complete sense. Now, what would you say, how does their journey look like? How do they learn about Assurance IT? You mentioned YouTube there a second ago. How does a typical journey look like before they, arrive and getting to know Assurance?
So for the longest time, it was actually word of mouth and through our partners. And those were like the only ways, just because we had such great partnerships with our clients, it actually made us stand out. And therefore, we got a lot of referrals that way. Now we're trying to have like a more proactive approach to it and trying to implement demand generation strategies. So really leading with content, and as I said before, on YouTube. And also we're doing a lot more blogs. Now you're thinking, well, blogs, like everyone has blogs, like that's not a good strategy. Right? But we are currently offering a data privacy training course that is the first of its kind in Quebec. And we can easily become a thought leader for when people are going to start to care about it in 3 months, because that's when it comes into play. And so an SEO strategy in such a niche market will work essentially.
Makes sense. It's interesting because I mean, you basically we're talking here about the early awareness stage, right? Where they're getting to know about the problem, where they're getting to know insurance IT. You are bringing up this idea of a course because we have a lot of people on the show and also listening in who really trying to figure what is a good awareness stage conversion goal, right? Because you can't get them into a demo. It's hard. You can't get them into, start using the product very often. How do you think about that course as a vehicle? What's your thinking about that?
Yeah, so I'm actually thinking even before the course. So the course is a great funnel to introduce them to Assurance IT and everything that we do, obviously. But even before that, we want to make sure that they see us as an expert to begin with. So when it's time to come to purchase, $1,000 course, it's a no-brainer.
Mhm.
And how we're doing that is with our content. And by being so niche, and it's so, so important for everybody listening, if you're not niche down, I urge you to do so. As soon as we started niching down, we started seeing much better results because all of our messaging we're all on the same page. Our website is clearer, our offering is clear, we're all working on the same projects. And so that's when content becomes really, really powerful because you really learn about your buyer persona and their journey, and you're able to tackle each part of it with your content.
That makes sense. You mentioned niching down for marketers, like in practical terms, what does that mean for you guys? A certain industry, a certain size of business, a certain persona in terms of jobs they have to be done? Like, how do you think about it?
So for our company, we did it in a few ways. We did it geographically, we did it by persona, we did it by company size. Now that just makes sense in the tech world. I would say you kind of have to do some competitive research and see what other people are doing. Because by niching down, you really give yourself a way to stand out from all your competition. If all your competition is focused on like accounting firms, it's probably best not to focus on accounting firms. And so what we did is we actually aligned with what our partners, like the industries that they were targeting. So we kind of aligned it with them, but we also targeted people in our geographic location, like we're based out of Montreal. And so it's just so much easier to target people who are around you, local SEO. Then you can have events, it's all local. It's easier, and there are so many more benefits, much easier to build relationships as well.
Makes a whole lot of sense. Now, you mentioned the website a couple of times. A lot of marketers that we have on the show, they're always very critical with their website and the role that it plays. How do you think about sort of, the strength of the website currently versus where do you see room for further improvement down the line?
Oh, I'm so critical of the website. Every week I'm like, should we just change it? Should we just revamp? Always. But in the end, we actually just updated it in January. As I mentioned earlier, we only had one product last year, so the website wasn't really representative of what we were offering and who we were. I think what we can do better on the website is to tell our story better and to really demonstrate our unique selling proposition, which is actually our team. We have such great talent on our team. And also, as I said before, the business basically for 10 years ran on word of mouth. That's something that we can leverage more on the website. Introducing the team, perhaps, being more content driven, so many things. I can go on, but I don't want to take up the whole time.
Okay. I mean, it's quite interesting, sort of that angle of the team to be as a conversion driver on the page, just in general, over the years. Doesn't just have to be with Assurance IT, just in general. What have you learned are like great ways to enhance conversions? Is there any sort of methods, tools, approaches that you've picked up over the years that you found helpful?
Conversions on the website, right?
Yep.
Oh man, yeah, I've worked with so many websites. For most of them, it's just a lot of testing. It's just a lot of saying like, "Hey, this doesn't seem very natural. How can we make this more natural?" And I remember one thing that we did at a previous place that I worked is, when you fill out a form and there's like 20 fields or even
Mhm,
just like four, people
mhm,
see that and then they don't want to fill it in. But
mhm,
what we found is when we only put one field at a time and you press next, people would fill it out more.
mhm, mhm.
So that was a great conversion trick that I remember. I think that one is worth chatting
Very cool.
about.
Those are those
Yeah.
little things that actually
Yeah.
can make a big difference. Very cool.
Hmm.
Um, let's switch gears a little bit. We talked about assurance IT. We
Okay.
talked about what you guys are doing. We talked about sort of how you're thinking about growth. I would like to learn about your journey and marketing a
Hmm.
little bit more. Now, the first thing is there's so much content out there. You actually were producing are producing basically an interesting podcast yourself on, and we do a little plug here at the Marketing Bound podcast.
Hmm.
Now, there is so much content out there for B2B marketers. What's your go-to places with all the noise out there? How do you like to filter down and get to the gist of what is actually helpful in your daily practice?
Okay. So I don't think this is going to be a common answer, but books.
Hmm.
So I'm usually talking to like another marketer because I have the Marketing Bound podcast. I talk to quite a few of them
Hmm.
and I'll be in conversation with them and they'll talk about a book that they're reading. And when they do that, that's usually where I go get information from those books and also from the network that I've built because of my podcast. I'm always on LinkedIn, always interacting with people who are in marketing, talking about marketing every single day. So my go-to resources are like the network for my podcast, LinkedIn, and books.
Makes sense. Makes for a very healthy mix. And to be honest, that we noticed this year as well that people bring up great books and can give a sentence or two on how it actually helped them. That is a great
Hmm.
direction giver on whether it's a good book to read or not. Very good. That would actually launch me into my rapid fire questions to wrap it up for today. Are you ready for those?
Oh, I'm ready.
Because the first question is quite on the topic. What is the last book you read?
Ooh, I'm currently reading Traction. And there are
Mhm.
two authors. I don't remember what their names are, but Traction.
Yep, it's a famous one. What is one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Data privacy in Quebec with our
Mhm.
course.
If there would be no boundaries in tech, what would be the one thing that you want to have fixed for your role today?
If they can like duplicate me several times.
Sir, what is the last thing that kept you awake at night about your company?
Oh my gosh. I actually do that a lot. Just like everything. Usually my to-do list, all the things I want to do, but then I have to take a step back and prioritize.
And for the very last question, right, I would like to do a little bit of time travel. Let's go back to the days of Concordia University, if you allow.
Hmm.
So you're adding out of formal education into the world of business growth and marketing. What's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey?
So I was very lost when I graduated from university, and I know a lot of marketers are, because as soon as you graduate, people think that you need to immediately know everything about marketing when that can't be further from the truth.
Mhm.
And so I would recommend joining a community like the Marketing Bound podcast, because that's exactly why I created it to begin with, is to help that persona when you just started your career, you just transitioned into B2B marketing and you just want someone to talk to about it. Sometimes you're the only marketing person in a company and that's super hard and there's no reason for it to be that hard and I wish there was a resource like that when I was just starting.
How can people find the Marketing podcast who are listening who are at that stage at the very moment?
Yes, they can go on any podcast player and marketingbound.com.
Awesome. Very cool. Laura, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on the show and share with us a bit more on Assurance IT and the Marketing Bound podcast. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about Assurance IT, what's the one thing they should remember?
That marketing is very much about trial and not to be too hard on yourself if something doesn't go right. Just continue moving forward and linking it back to research on your customers.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathwing Presents.
Thank you.